do a little announcement at the top saying this is Larry Morrissey. It's December 10th, 2015. I'm in the home of Bob Kersh and Philip Morgan in Jackson, and they're both members of Wells Church, and I'm here to talk with you for the Wells Church United Methodist Church Oral History Project. If you don't mind, if you could start off, you could maybe both just tell a little bit about your background. And I guess in this case, I'm interested in hearing maybe, if you grew up in a religious household, what your background was as a young person, whether you did go to church or not, and kind of how that maybe had a relation in terms of leading you to Wells eventually.
Okay.
You mind starting, Bob?
No, I don't mind.
Okay.
Well, I was born in Sacramento, California in 1952. My father was in the service. My father and mother are both Mississippians. 3 years, when I was 3 years old, we moved to Pearl, Mississippi. And I grew up in Pearl. The first church I attended was Paul Truett Baptist Church in Pearl. And we went to church. We were a family who attended church. I was an only child until I was 16. So I was raised as an only child. I went to church with my parents. I don't remember a lot of my church. I remember some things about going to Vacation Bible School, being in the RAs? I think that was the boys. The GAs and the RAs. It was the younger groups. I went to Sunday school, went to church with my parents. I don't really remember having any kind of personal religious experience there. I remember when I was a teenager, my mother said it was time for me to go and be baptized, and so I did. I didn't really have a personal experience at that point in time. I graduated from Pearl High School in 1970, and when I left home and went to college, I went to Hines Junior College. I quit going to church. And so I didn't attend church again other than on occasions with my parents until Wells Church. And I was about 44 or 45 years old when a friend of mine called me one morning. During that period of time, I had gotten involved with drugs and alcohol. And so I was pretty much, I'd had a lot of consequences. I'd been arrested several times, lost jobs, lost my home, and I was living with my mother at the time. And my friend Sandra, who I'd worked with years before, I worked in the bank for 16 years, so I maintained a job. I finished college, got a degree, worked in a business situation for 16 years, and then worked on my own for quite a while, but was having some problems and had wound up living with my mother. And one Sunday morning, a friend of mine called me and asked me if I wanted to go to church. And so at that point in time, I was willing to go with her, and she brought me to Wells.
Had you heard about Wells before?
Never,
Okay.
never heard of Keith Tonkel, never heard of Wells Church. It's amazing, after I went there, if you speak Keith's name, somebody knows it. At the party we just went to, we were talking about going to Wells, and they said, "Oh, Keith Tonkel." So Keith is a well-known person. But no, I was completely disassociated with any form of religion up until that point in time. And I went with her. And Keith preached, and all I can tell you is I heard was grace and mercy. I don't know why I use those words, but love, maybe that was love, something. It touched me where no other pastor had touched me before. He was the very first organized religion pastor who had ever spoken and touched my heart. That's the way I would put it. So I started going there. I just started going. I felt the desire to go. My friend Sandra stayed for a couple of months. I didn't know the formality of joining the church, but since I had not wanted to go back years before, when my mother suggested at 16 or 15 that I needed to go down and be saved, I wanted to be saved. So one Sunday, in the Baptist church, there's always a long call, where they'll sing "Just as I Am" forever, and just ever and ever and ever. So anyway, that Sunday, which was maybe a month after I had first come there, I went running down front to join the church. And I don't know what Keith said, but he said, "Well, let's talk about it." And come to find out, there's some more steps in the Methodist church as far as joining the church. And so anyway, I went later and talked to Keith, and we talked, and then I joined the church. So that was my personal commitment to a church. And I started going there, and I started going religiously. I was there every time the door opened. I went to men's. One of the first things that touched me after that was I went to the men's group. There's a men's group that meets once a month, and I went, and I was welcomed there, and I felt welcomed. I remember one man in particular coming up and speaking to me personally, and I was afraid and unaware of how a church worked or what, but I was going to stay there. I was committed to doing this no matter what the fear was. So
you were by yourself.
I was by myself.
Kind of
she didn't attend much more, and I was on my own.
Okay.
And I wasn't going to let that stop me. So, but as people started welcoming me in the church service, I would sit in the same place, and there's a part of the church service that we welcome each other and talk about the life of the church. It's called Life of the Church. Birthday celebrations, things like that. And so people would shake my hand, and I started to see the same people and started to kind of feel a little bit more engaged with it. I worked on a habitat build early on at Wells. Wells used to do habitat builds. We haven't done one in a while, but I worked on a habitat build with people. I went to men's group. I joined Keith's Sunday school class. I stopped drinking and drugging, but some of my other addictive behavior was still going on. So I was there for about 2 years in Keith's class and doing these projects and go to men's group, going a lot. And I used again, drugs and alcohol. And I couldn't get back. I got out again, and I left for a while. And one of the things that Keith does with his Sunday school class is he gives you a week for sick, a week for sin, and then he calls you. So I would say it was 3 weeks that I was out. And he called me, and I had been using, and I kind of broke down, and nobody else had ever really done that particular. No pastor had ever done anything like that. So he suggested I go to treatment, but I didn't. It was probably another 6 months before I went to treatment. But I went to treatment December the 11th, 1999. Tomorrow will be my 16th sobriety birthday. So I went to treatment. I had been to treatment before. I'd had a lot of consequences because of drugs and alcohol. And about being gay. When I went to, when they did the interview, I said, look, you've got to deal with my sexuality because, it's an addiction too. And if I don't overcome or deal with this, which at that point in time, I thought that was me being celibate or straight. I thought the gay was the problem. But they said that they had a program, sex addiction program at this particular treatment center that I went to. So while I was in the treatment center, I started to have these realizations that I was truly an alcoholic. AA was, I'd had that spiritual awakening with Keith at Wells. That was when the spiritual part of this kind of started. And then it took the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous to give me some steps to change my behavior. Just because I had a spiritual awakening didn't do it. I had to change my behavior. Things had to change. And so while I was in treatment, I started to see that, and I started to see that working the 12 steps along with my church was what I needed to do. And so I got a sponsor. I started doing what AA told me to do, and then I went back to Wells. And some people knew what had happened and knew that I was recovering. And there was a Sunday school class there called the James Club. I moved from Keith's class to the James Club. And the James Club is a recovering Sunday school class that has a recovery Bible. It's a 12-step recovery Bible. So it merges both the 12 steps in the Bible. And, I can sit and listen to a sermon and I can hear what steps they're doing. So it fits really well for me. You don't have to have organized religion for Alcoholics Anonymous. You can have a power greater than yourself, a higher power that you come to understand. And I believe that. My higher power is not, in my concept, the same as other people's. It's a power that's personal to me. And so that helped me to deal with being a gay Christian, because I came to believe that my higher power, doesn't judge me for that. And that gave me, that's given me some relief to live into my own integrity, to live into what the Bible says. The Bible says, work out your own salvation. And so I think I'm biblical. There's biblical things that I'm not if in certain biblical terms, but there are biblical terms that I believe I'm very biblical. Redeemed, I believe I'm redeemed. Saved, I believe I'm saved. I have to do things. I don't believe I'm always saved, but I do have to do things. So I've done that. I went to the recovery Sunday school group. I went on mission trips. So I was involved in going to Mexico, to Delamak, several times on the mission trips. I did not have any talent to go on a mission trip. I couldn't speak Spanish. I could paint a little bit, which is what I did. I sat around and talked, but I made friends with people from Wales and also extended Wales people. There's other people in the Methodist Conference that are very, very connected to Wales. They don't go here, they live in other places, but they're connected. So I got involved with them. I got more involved with the Methodist Church. I went on several mission trips, habitat bills, we have a food pantry. One of the missions of our church is a food pantry for where we are, because we're located in the area that we're located in, and we help the neighborhood with food, and we have other ministries too that are there. So I helped with that some. In this period of time, I can't tell you when I joined the choir. So I sing in the choir. We were talking about Jamie. At that time, there was another choir director, Leland, and I just was attracted to his voice, and he seemed like a nice guy. So I went and asked him. I had been in the band in high school, so I joined the choir, and I really had never sung before. So that was something else new that I took on. I love it. Love it. I've been in the choir now, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, I guess. Quite a while. Love it. I was put on the council, the Council on Ministries. We have a big council. We try to include a lot of people on the council. We try to engage everybody in something, to do something. So I got on that first, and then let me see. I'll get confused here because I really don't know. But so presently I'm on the pastor parish committee. I serve with that. I've been able to watch our change. We've recently had a big change in the secretarial, in the pastoral, in the last year or so, and I've been involved in that change. And it's been really wonderful to see how God has worked, because there is some fear what will happen to Wells Church when Keith leaves. Even though I've heard that from the time I went there. There's always been this kind of underlying, what will we do when Keith leaves? Well, by being involved in these things, I'm also chairman of the finance committee. And our finances have been in flux. We have not had the tithing, the giving that it takes to maintain our budget. So now we have a program called Close the Gap that we're talking about, letting people know that our giving has not matched our expenses, our budget. And so we don't discuss money a lot. Keith feels like, and to a certain extent I do too, money follows purpose. God will supply. But we have to be aware. We have to make the church aware. One of the things that Wells Church does not do is we don't have a tithing. A lot of the churches have a commitment to tithe, and
they want to see X amount.
They want you to commit, and they want you so that they can plan their budget. Right. It makes sense, and it is a conference thing. Wells doesn't do that. There are no commitments to tithing, but we are now talking right now about. We just had our charge conference, which is our business meeting for the year, last night. And we talked about money. We let people know where we are. We've been talking about, we're calling it Closing the Gap. We're letting the congregation know that right now we need to balance our budget by the end of the year. And the way we're doing that is letting people know. So if they can increase their giving, or if they can pray more, or if they can attend more, whatever it is that there's their gift, they can do. So I've gotten very engaged in Wells Church. It amazes me that this church has allowed me, to come from where I was, where I had no relationship in a church.
Did you have, and I apologize if this is too personal, did you have anger, hostility? Did you feel mistreated or like, is it in your younger years that kind of kept you, or was it just disinterest? Disinterest.
Yeah. Best I can tell you. No, I don't think I was angry. I knew I was gay early on, And I don't remember the preacher preaching, "You're going to hell," personally, and pointing at me, and nobody confronted me. So, there wasn't that anger, but social anxiety, knowing in society, hearing what you hearing what the church says in public. Nobody sat me down. No pastor sat me down and chastised me and said, "You need to convert. You need to change." But I just knew. And also, drugs and alcohol came along, and that was what fixed me. Religion, spirituality didn't fix me at that point in time. Drugs and alcohol came along, and that made it easy to communicate with people. And I'm an extrovert, as you already see. I like to talk. So I hadn't got a problem with that. But the drugs and alcohol just made it, I felt a companionship to people. And I didn't feel that in the church. Yeah. I feel that at Wells now. I told him last night, early on when I came there, I asked a man, "What do you do if you didn't get self-esteem growing up as a child, if you weren't nurtured that way?" And because he had just written a children's book on how do you nurture self-esteem, And so what I've learned is you do esteemable things. You stay committed to a group of people. You let them see who you are. I've tried to be very transparent. And that's the reason that's the other reason about our openness about being a gay couple. Transparency. Because if you're going to be against me, you need to know me. You need to see me every day. You need to see my life in action. If you're going to judge me. And so that's another piece of the transparency thing that I've wanted to keep. And I think we are pretty much that way.
Were you that transparent when you first
No.
got there? How did you
I was gay.
become that transparent person over time?
I was gay, but I was celibate. And I had a sponsor who thought that that was God's plan for me, to be celibate. And so I did that. And there were periods, I dated a couple of ladies there, thinking that maybe God had helped me to get sober. I thought God would make me straight. And I tried that, but that wasn't the plan. I'm convinced now that I was born this way. It happened before there was any decision there was no decision on my part to be gay. So what I came to terms with was that I would be celibate. But I told people, if this is the way God wants it, then He'll give me the power to do that. But that's not what I want. I wanted a relationship. I feel like all of my spiritual life is about relationship with God, relationship with other people. And I think this is an intimate relationship that helps to fulfill my life as a human being. So he came along, lost my sponsor because she was, and she wasn't a member of Wells, but she gave me some history of the Bible that quoted homosexuality as being an abomination. And so I got on my knees and I said, "God, if this is going to happen, you got to help me." And He gave me help. There were some things that came into place that kind of directed me that I was going in the right path, and that God was not going to abandon me, as my sponsor felt. And so far He hadn't. I have more confidence now that I'm a sinner, but I'm a beloved child of God, and if I do the best I can on a daily basis, then that's the best I can do with what I got. So I'm going to be the best gay Christian that I know I can be. As transparent as I can. That's why I was telling you this is why we're doing what we're doing. because that is what we want to be. That's what I hope history will report. I've never had gay mentors. I thought one time, what gay person can I look up to as a spiritual leader or a role model? And I really didn't have any other than not so healthy role models. So I've looked for that. And I hope that's what I'll be. I hope that's what we'll be. Healthy, spiritual, Christian. So, you need to talk to him.
Yeah. I'm going to switch this over to you.
Okay. I was born in Peoria, Illinois in 1959. We moved to North Mississippi when I was 7 or 8 years old, and never seen my father. My stepfather was always in my family, and he raised me with my mother, and I have some brothers and sisters and half-brothers and step-brothers, so I'm from a blended family. We never went to church. I'm not from a church family. I would probably call them agnostics, but I was an atheist, so I never had that feeling of any God in my life or anything. And when I started college, I got into drugs and alcohol, and my sexuality was a little different. I was considered myself a bisexual. I was always interested in both genders. So, and I didn't have the shame and guilt along with mine that a lot of people had with it, and so the drugs and alcohol became a bigger and bigger part of my life. I ended up getting a girl pregnant, got married, and continued bisexual relationships that she didn't know about, and then we ended up having 3 children, and then got divorced, and then my bisexuality turned. I realized that it went more to the gay, that I was gay. I didn't have the interest in the other women that I used to have, and of course the drugs and alcohol was increasing along with that, and I ended up going to prison for 2 years for manufacturing crystal methamphetamine in 2007. I got out of prison, I got paroled from prison in 2009, and that's when I come to Jackson. I got to Jackson. I actually found out I had HIV while I was in prison, and so whenever I was coming up for parole, I had to have an address, and they didn't want me back in North Mississippi because I'd been a drug dealer and a drug user, and I'd really embarrassed my family and all that, and so there was a place called the Grace House, which is people with HIV and AIDS for transitional living, and I come there, and that's how I ended up in Jackson in August of 2009. And that same year, I joined AA when I got out of prison because I knew I couldn't stay clean without it, and that's where I started accepting a little bit of spirituality, that there might be something. Wasn't sure about it then. Even then, really struggled with it a lot. So I was going to AA. I was religiously going to AA and had a sponsor and working the steps. And I got a job with a guy that went to work with a guy that was doing painting. He painted, and he was actually painting Bob's house, and I was helping him paint Bob's house when I met Bob, and and we talked a little bit, and then that's we got to know each other a little bit better, and then I ended up seeing him in AA meetings, and then we started dating, and that's when he asked me about going and invited me to church, and I'd heard about Wells Fest before that, but I didn't know that much about Wells Church. I heard a couple people in recovery talk about Wells Church. It was a good recovery church, and so I went there, and people was very accepting of me. I'm a little bit of a different vein than a lot of people. A lot of people with their sexuality is don't ask, don't tell, like it used to be. Well, I'm of the different vein that I'm going to let you know right off who I am and what I am, and if you have a problem with it, then you can do what you need to do. I'm not going to let it interfere with my life, and that's what I did, and I experienced the Wales Methodist Church motto: loving, caring, sharing, is what I experienced when I went there. And it wasn't just overwhelming all at one time, but I mean, people, I didn't have to hide behind something. I didn't have to be something I wasn't. I didn't have to say I believed something I didn't believe. I mean, I was an atheist, even when I come to Wales. And people knew that about me, and I didn't have to be ashamed or not want to talk about it. They loved me and cared about me and let me be where I was at. And Bob was really involved in the church, and we started seeing each other more and decided to make a committed relationship, and so I knew that Wales was a big part of his life, so I thought I would give it a chance. And where most of the people there at Wales will share that Keith Tonkel was their God, or what they found, their grace and mercy. But Todd Watson was the associate pastor, and that's the one that I heard it through, was that I'm a beloved child of God, and that I'm okay, and I heard it through Keith too, but I mean I heard it more through Todd. Todd was a little more personal with me. I think well, I won't go there, but I think Todd was more able to relate with me with where I'd been and what I've done, and that, and so I've just started attending church, and I would go to the men's breakfast that once a month, and right after I started attending on a regular basis, it was in AA, and I was called by the leader of the group and asked if I would tell my story. And in men's breakfast, that's what we do at men's breakfast. Somebody tells their story, life story, or their church story, or whatever. And I accepted that because that's what we're taught in AA to do, is when we were asked to do it. So I told him I would, and I got up there and I told my life story, and I talked about my sexuality, my lack of spirituality, my abusive upbringing, and all of that, and people accepted me, and nobody got up and walked out, and everybody let me be, didn't judge me, and one thing that Keith said at that was, that we all have a different road to salvation, and that we find it, and my love and my experience of the church has just grown from there. I helped Loy Moncrief with the with working in the on the outside of the church. I do a lot of work on the inside of the church. I've done some. We did some work at Katrina several years after Katrina, of course, and then we did another habitat work job that I helped Keith May on, and so I've been involved in that aspect of it. But what I have found is that the people at Wells is the most caring and lovable people that I've ever met, and that's made me feel at home. I have heard preachers on TV, and I've been to church a few times in my life, and I could never feel like I could be a part of none of that. It wasn't something I could relate to or commit to. But what Wales teaches and preaches is something that I can be a part of. It's something that I don't have to be somebody I'm not. I don't have to act like somebody I'm not. And it makes me want to be a better person by doing that. I don't have the long history that a lot of people have. I've only been there for 6 years, but the time that I've been there, it's been a real growing and nurturing experience for me. So.
And you're a trustee too?
Yeah, I'm on the board of trustees there now too. So.
I was curious about kind of the recovery kind of aspect of Wells, and is there anything kind of based on you guys have been involved in kind of in the broader sense, right, as well, not just at Wells. Is there anything distinctive about kind of how recovery is treated, or how the recovery groups work at Wells? Is there anything that kind of connects to the bigger part of it, or is it just another church kind of recovery ministry? Or
No, I think they're. One of the things that I find real accepting in it in the Wales is that we, just like our birthdays, we announce our sobriety birthdays, and we always get a warm welcome about that day. A lot of churches, you don't tell that you're in recovery. Because you would be ostracized for it. So, but Wales, besides having the James Club that helps people in recovery, is that there's lots of people in the church that really encourage you and look up to you for being in recovery, and I think that helps a lot. So
there's also AA and NA meetings outside AA.
the
meetings
Georgetown
that meet at
group
the church,
meet at the
every
church.
night of the week.
Yeah,
so it's
And
an
then
active spot that's separate from the church proper, but
right, it's like
Yeah.
right.
And another thing that's been real helpful for me is our Wednesday night church. We have a class that we pick out different books. We don't have a Bible study class, but we pick out books about either the Methodism or we even do Buddhism. We expand our knowledge of spirituality, and it's not real rigid, and it's allowed me to open my mind a lot. So that's been really helpful.
what about the worship service itself, in terms of what elements of it really do you connect with, or what I've heard people talk about the distinctiveness of the service.
Yeah. I think for me, we have Keith is our pastor, and then our associate pastor. There's two different types of ministry of services there. Keith is a real personal storyteller, and pulls it all together and keeps it down to earth, and then our other associate pastor, our new associate pastor, is is more in the lines of outside the box, and he can bring a whole different look into a service, a message. So both of them are really, really good, and I look forward to hearing either one of them. But they both have different styles of preaching, but it's really good too, and it's never too long.
Both pretty brief, which is nice.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
They
yeah.
get
I
their
mean,
point across.
yeah. We don't have to have an hour preaching to get a point across. I mean, they can do it pretty quick. So.
And we have Life of the Church, which is kind of unique.
Yeah.
That's where the birthdays and the prayers and the, what's going on in the church, that I think is very personal, and brings something to the service that is personal.
One thing I'm just curious about is as a longer time member, if you could talk. I've known people that Wells is kind of like a community institution. There are people that maybe aren't members there, but they have an affiliation to maybe through Wells Fest, or they're not church people. But
Right.
if you say to them, they'll say they connect with Wells in whatever way, through Wells Fest or through knowing Keith or something like that. That's
I've
kind
heard
of unique
people-
for a church, I think.
I've heard people say that they joined the church because they got nominated for a position on the council, and they thought, well, it was about time for them to join the church. So a lot of people will come there, maybe out of bad relationships in churches, maybe not sure if they really want to be associated in that joining kind of capacity. We have a lot of people who are not members of Wells who come, and they come religiously and for a long time. And there's no push. It's just like I said, there is no call at the end of the service. Come and join the church, come and be saved. It's almost like it's a personal thing that each person, one of the things that I think I've heard both good things and bad things about this. One thing is people really don't push you joining the church, because I think everybody came there and kind of sat in the back and kind of, was a little not sure at first, and so that can be good and bad, because some people I've heard say, well, you're just not, you just don't engage me enough to ask me to do this, and you don't engage me enough. I personally like I like the fact that it comes from you. People are very friendly. And there is a period of time when we shake hands and introduce each other, and you get to know each. And that's how I did that, is through just that personal relationship. But nobody pushed anything on me. It was all of my own volition, and I think that's pretty. Even with our tithing, that's the way Wells is. It's almost. AA talks about attraction rather than promotion. Wells is more of an attraction. You have to kind of be attracted there for something. You've got to have something that pulls you there. And Wells, I think, allows you to be where you are, just like what he said, to be where you are and let you come to it rather than it pushing, to bring you to it. And there's a balance in that too, because the Methodist Church has a program, meet one, greet one, or I mean, there are campaigns to go get people to come. And I love to talk about wells, and we talk about it everywhere we go. And people are always invited. We're always inviting people. That's the way I do it. I don't really go hand out tracts or really, I don't do that kind of marketing, I would say. To me personally, Wells is more of an attraction rather than a promotion. You would have to be attracted to something at Wells beyond where it's located or the building it's in. Now, people are very much attracted to Keith. So I think that's different. And I don't have any background in other churches, so I can't talk about that. But that's my personal take on the kind of uniqueness, maybe. The feeling that's there. Yes, there are a lot of people that attend there that don't officially join the church.
What about, Keith has been such, synonymous with Wells for so long. What are kind of what are the pros and cons of that, having that basically long-term pastor, there's some very great things about it, but I wonder also about kind of.
Well, the cons is when Keith retires or passes away, and I told him one time, I said, when you fall out in the pulpit, I'll help carry you out. We don't know what's going to happen. We never know. There are people that go to Wells specifically for Keith, and when Keith retires, they will leave. That's what I believe. And I would say that's a downside. That church is more than Keith. And I heard something one time that said a good teacher teaches the student how to do without them. And I believe that. And I would say that Keith would say, after me, I want you to thrive and I want you to carry my message after me. Jesus did it. So that's my take on that. Now, that won't be and so God will show us, we're talking about long range plans and we know we're an aging church and but I don't think we're a dying church. I don't believe we are. I think we're aging, and I think we'll go through a transition. We have already gone through transitions. Jim Young, who was we had a long-time secretary. I don't even know how long, 15, 20 years or better. Jim was our secretary, did everything. Wonderful. We had to hire several people to take his place. I mean, it was unbelievable what Jim did. But, as I said, I was on the pastor parish committee, so I watched. We hired 2 part-time people who were members of the church. One worked for the paper. One was the principal of a school. They are awesome together. They're a team. We have a secretary that's part-time. She's a banker. She's awesome. We've started a new accounting program this last year. It's a great program, and they're doing a great job with it. There's a lot of energy in the change, in the transition from Jim retiring. Todd left, who had been a real stay, like for him and others, and me too. He's a real dear friend of ours. He left. We thought, how can things go on? But being involved with it and watching what I say is God's work being done, I think he's done better than I ever dreamed that would happen. And I don't believe he's going to let us down now. I don't know what the future holds. I plan on being there. I had one friend said, well, if Wells did, because of where it is, and Keith retiring and people having to come in from a long distance, you got to come to Wells. You got to be intentional about what you do if you come to Wells. So one person said, well, if indeed that facility was no longer, or wells, then maybe we would be like seeds that we would go out and, go out into the community and take wells with us. And I don't have any disagreement with that. That could be possible. But for me, I'm going to stay there and be as dynamic a leader as I can be for as long as I can be. And that's my goal. That's my future. That's my 5-year plan. That's my 10-year plan, is to remain there, be active and vital and alive, talk about it to people. God will do what God's going to do. And I want to stay around and see it. So that's kind of how I see Wells and the future of Wells. How did I get to Wells? I'd never heard. You asked me, had I ever heard of Keith, and I'd never walked in a Methodist church in my life. I got there by grace, by being invited by a friend. So do I believe that can keep on? Miracle. So miracle brought me there. So will miracle keep us going? I'm willing to see.
Of course, I feel like one of the cons of Keith is that when he leaves, is anybody that replaces him is going to be compared to him. That's the biggest con. I don't think anybody can meet that criteria. I mean, he's been there, he's done a lot, and if we compare him to him, they're always going to be less than, not enough, and I hope that don't happen, but I'm afraid it will. That's the biggest con.
I personally never heard another preacher preach. We like Todd a lot. Todd was good, but I've never heard anybody like Keith. And I think if you ask people, they will tell you that. I mean, I'm there because of Keith. I am. I hope I stay there, even if Keith retires.
Yeah, because your faith's bigger than one person, and if it's all based on the person.
We hope.
Yeah, it's true.
We like to find that out too.
Yes, that will be. You really test the metal of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's not to say that there's a lot of good people. This is all personal. This is our this is my personal story. And it's not to belittle or, we learned that from Keith. Keith never puts anybody else down. That's what I've been taught by him. No other congregation, no other ministry, no other anything. We're just one among many, a part of the body.
Philip, I talked to Loy, obviously we talked a lot about the grounds and the kind of the physical aspect of the church, and I'm just curious if you have any, I don't know if you've been involved with that garden or any other aspect of it that in particular kind of, you're really interested in, whether it be some, physical or outside element of it.
Yeah, of course. I've done landscaping all my life, and what I've been, what's been good for me is that I've been privileged enough to work with Loy to help him out in the Wales. There's a big area there, and he had a lot to take care of, and when he gets overwhelmed, he calls me, and as me and my guys go over. So I like all parts of it. I don't. He's done just an immaculate job of making the grounds there beautiful. It's something that it just amazes me sometimes.
Yeah, very intentional about every rock has a meaning, and
exactly,
has a place. And
right.
You didn't I've seen those rocks, but then you took me out and explained them to me. And
exactly. He asked me.
Every rock has a story. Let me tell you.
Exactly. It has its this is why it's there because I wanted it to say this.
Exactly. So he's very intentional about it. It wasn't just hazmat put in there. It was very intentionally done, and he's done a wonderful job, and he continues to.
Fest is a very huge part in the community of
Yeah.
Wells Church. For a small church to put on that type of event, and that gets to a lot of people. A lot of people. Now, this is back to the attraction rather than promotion. A lot of people have been reported to say, "I didn't know this was a church event." It is a church event. It's Wells Fest, but you don't feel. I mean, it's not so much advertised. There's a lot of conversation, and people surely know, just like with us, when you talk to people, I go to Wells. Wells puts us on. It's amazing. It's a miracle that it can be done. The money goes to nonprofits. The money's become significant. I was chairman of that one year. And now I work with the art auction. We have a live art auction, which is really, we've moved it inside. It's a separate day than the Wells Fest. And it's a really neat experience. So, that event itself puts Wells kind of in the general population, maybe.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but again, people have said I didn't know that I didn't know Wells Church did this.
Has it ever brought anyone into the church? People who were somehow kind of
Yes.
in the periphery of Wells Fest?
Oh
And
yes.
then became
Oh,
members?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People have said they went to Wells Fest and came to the church, which is, I don't know. That's not really the purpose of it. You would hope that, it would pique somebody's interest to come see what the church was like if they saw something there that they liked. But yes, I suspect there's a good many people that first went to Wells Fest. Wells Fest was the first sober experience that I had to show me it's a non-alcohol drug family event. It was the first thing that I went to that I had fun at sober. So I'm real comfortable and happy with that, what we choose to do with that we choose that to be a drug and alcohol free family event. That's kind of unusual for music festivals.
Yeah.
So, we're not sequestered by any means. We're in the public, and I like the fact that that's a part of Wells Fest. We kind of struggled with that when we moved the art auction inside, because when I was chairman the year that we did that, somebody said, well, you're not going to raise as much money as other auctions because you don't ply people with alcohol. And so we chose to deal with that situation. We don't, we still don't. And we've done well. And I think this year we raised $60,000 for Harbor House, which is a chemical drug dependency.
And the art auction is like in the week leading up, or
Yes,
2 weeks?
the Tuesday night before
Tuesday
the.
before.
It's always Wells Fest is always the last last Saturday
in September.
September, and the art auction is the Tuesday night before.
I think about, I guess one of the things when I was talking about affiliate people, there's a lot of musicians that I know who are, long time, maybe they're not members of Wells, but they've been playing at Wells Fest for a decade, at this point, the whole, the whole run. So there's that kind of
Well, like I said,
connection.
the word eclectic comes to mind when
Yeah.
it's the people that come in and out of Wells, and people come in and out.
Yeah.
They move in and out. At one time, we were talking about, I don't know, jokingly, but so we want to engage people to come to Wells. And so we were talking about, well, why do people leave Wells? And we said, well, maybe we should have exit interviews. Why did you leave Wells? Well, we're not going to do that. But one day I ran into a lady that we were talking, and she said, "Oh, I went to Wells I went to Wells, and she doesn't anymore." And I said, "Well, just let me ask you, why don't you go anymore?" And she said, "Well, I got what I needed." So she talked about how she was so broken when she got there, and she needed that kind of loving, caring, sharing. But then, in a period of time, she left. So, I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't know how you change that. And I think a lot of people come there and leave, and come back and leave, and come and go, and I mean, I think that's a part of the culture of Wells Church.
Yeah, you don't grow up in that. Well, I mean, I guess there are people who've grown up in the church now, but it is a church that kind of. One of the things I thought was interesting is Sarah shared the directory with me, and you can see, there's people from Raymond, there's people from Northeast Jackson. I mean, it's just literally the entire metro, and people from out of state who are still listed. I thought that was really interesting.
I've heard quite a few people who left Wells that went to moved for business purposes or whatever, family purposes, and quite a few of them have. And this goes back to your other question. Quite a few of them have said, "I haven't found what I found at Wells." Now, I don't know whether that makes it unique or that makes it Keith. I don't know what that makes it. But I have heard that statement made on several occasions that people who have left for whatever reason are still looking for some church affiliation like that.
Well, I think I've gone through the questions I had for you both. Is there anything that we didn't cover about the church or some element of it that you want to make sure to mention before we shut the recorder off?
I don't think I do.
Nope, I'm good.
Well, I really appreciate your time tonight. I'm really moved by your testimony, and thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.